Welcome to Old Worlds for Sleep, the channel where the past doesn't just teach, it breathes. Where kings, empires, and forgotten hearts come alive, just long enough to help you drift peacefully into dreams. Tonight, we travel to an age of velvet and steel, an empire of steam engines, candlelight, and duty. A world ruled by a single woman whose name still defines an era, Queen Victoria. Close your eyes for a moment. Can you hear the faint sound of carriage wheels on wet London streets? The echo of church bells across fog and factory smoke? The whisper of a queen riding by lamplight, her pen trembling as she mourns the man who once steadied her world? Her story is not one of crowns or power, but of love, loss, and the quiet endurance that carried her through it all. From the bright halls of Buckingham Palace to the shadowed corridors of Windsor, we'll walk beside her through light, through grief, and into the stillness of her final night. So dim the lights, take a slow breath, and let history's last heartbeat guide you to rest. Hey there, traveler of time. Tonight, you're not just listening, you're arriving. It's the night of May 24th, 1819, and you've just awakened inside Kensington Palace. The air feels faintly cool against your skin. Candlelight trembles across polished mahogany. Outside, London dozes beneath a pale half-moon, its carriages creaking in the distance. You take a slow breath. The scent of lavender water mixes with smoke and something else, anticipation. A woman is crying out in pain. But this isn't the cry of sorrow. It's the rhythm of life beginning. You find yourself in a dining room turned birthing chamber, practical, close to the kitchens below so hot water can be fetched quickly. Servants move quietly, shadows gliding like waves of black silk. The walls seem to hold their breath. Can you feel it, that fragile stillness right before history changes? The woman in labor is Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, widowed once, married again, and now fighting through pain with quiet determination. Her husband, Prince Edward, Duke of Kent, paces nearby, his hands clasped behind his back, every creak of the floor betraying his anxiety. You almost want to whisper to him, "She'll make it. The child will live." Because you know what he doesn't. This small, unseen moment will echo across the world for generations. At last, a sharp cry pierces the room. A baby's voice, thin but insistent. The midwife lifts her, wrapped in white linen. The infant's skin glows pink in the flicker of the candles. Tiny fingers curl, already grasping at life. You feel the air loosen around you. Everyone exhales at once. Relief, exhaustion, joy. The mother whispers the name softly, almost like a secret. Alexandrina Victoria. Named for her godfather, Tsar Alexander of Russia, and herself. No one will remember the first name, but the second, Victoria, will define an entire era. Can you imagine holding a child who will one day rule a quarter of the earth? Would you sense greatness in her tiny clenched hand, or just see another fragile life among millions? The Duke leans down, eyes glistening with pride. He doesn't know that his time is short, that pneumonia will steal him before the baby learns to walk. But for now there is warmth. He kisses the mother's brow, then the child's forehead, whispering a prayer in a language only fathers understand. You look around the room. Heavy curtains drawn against the dawn, candlelight trembling on porcelain bowls, water cooling in basins. There's a sweetness to the air now, the mix of sweat and lavender, the proof that something has ended and something greater begun. Outside, the first birds of London begin to sing. Their faint, quivering notes blend with the low toll of church bells, as if the city itself is welcoming its newest daughter. The servants tidy quietly. The midwife wipes her hands. A nurse hums an old German lullaby. Time seems to pause, balancing delicately between exhaustion and awe. And then it hits you, the strangeness of being here. You know how the story will unfold. This baby will grow to oversee the Industrial Revolution, the rise of empire, the dawn of modern Britain. Her reign will last 63 years, shaping everything from morals to architecture, from politics to Christmas trees. But right now, she's just a sleeping infant, her chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. If you could whisper something into her tiny ear, what would it be? A blessing? A warning? A secret from the future? You watch as Princess Victoria's eyes close, her breathing steadies. The candles burn lower. The servants whisper of omens and destiny, but exhaustion silences even superstition. You feel the room's warmth begin to fade as dawn filters through the curtains. Gold light catches dust motes drifting in the air, stars of another kind swirling in the quiet after creation. Can you feel that calm? The way history sometimes begins not with fanfare, but with a single, steady breath? You take one yourself, slow, deep grounding. The story has only just begun. In the next part, this palace will echo with footsteps of a child who has already lost her father and begun to feel the weight of invisible crowns. But for now, rest here in the hush after birth. Let the sound of distant bells blend with your breathing. Imagine the future queen sleeping soundly beside you. Her tiny hand unclenched, her world just beginning. The candles have burned low now. Morning light spills through the tall windows of Kensington Palace, warm and golden, gliding across the floor where servants once hurried through the night. It's quiet, that tender quiet that follows great beginnings. The baby sleeps in her cradle, swaddled in soft white linen. You lean closer, hearing only the faint whisper of her breath. For a moment, you imagine she can feel the sunlight before she can understand it. Warmth as promise, light as lullaby. But destiny rarely allows innocence to last. Barely 8 months later, January 1820, winter grips England in its coldest form. Outside, frost clings to the palace gates like lace. Inside, the corridors echo with footsteps muffled by heavy carpets and heavier hearts. The Duke of Kent, Victoria's father, lies pale and shivering in his bed. Pneumonia has taken hold. His breath rattles, shallow and uneven. You can hear it if you listen closely, the fragile sound of a life flickering like a candle in a draught. His wife, the Duchess, kneels beside him. The baby, now with brighter eyes and a stronger grip, sleeps nearby, unaware that her father's hand will soon never hold hers again. The room smells of wet wool, medicine, and melting ice. You can almost taste the cold in the air. Have you ever entered a room where grief was already waiting for you? Could you sense it before anyone spoke a word? When the Duke's final breath comes, it is barely a sound, a sigh more than a farewell. The Duchess's sob breaks the silence, but even that feels muffled, as if the palace itself refuses to echo sorrow too loudly. Outside, snow falls quietly on London's rooftops, blanketing the city in white, beautiful, indifferent. You feel the weight of that stillness settle in your chest. A young widow, a mother twice bereaved, and a tiny infant who will never remember the warmth of her father's arms. They say memory begins later, but grief finds us early. Even without knowing, the body remembers absence. Can a baby feel loss before she understands love? Can the heart ache for someone it never truly met? The funeral procession moves through the frozen streets. Black horses, black veils, the clop of hooves dulled by snow. You watch from a distance, the smell of smoke from torches mingling with the cold. A child's life has barely begun, and already it has been touched by mourning. Inside Kensington, the Duchess now governs her world with iron caution. Fear of further loss makes her vigilant, perhaps too much so. She draws the curtains early, keeps her daughter close, and speaks of duty like a prayer. Every room feels colder without the Duke's presence, the laughter gone from its corners. Even the air seems more formal now, as if the palace itself has straightened its posture. At night, the baby stirs in her cradle, sensing the tension that fills the walls. A nurse hums a lullaby in German, her voice trembling slightly. The flame of a single candle flickers, painting the shadows with soft gold. You find yourself holding your breath, afraid even your sound might disturb the fragile peace. And then you realize, this is the first shaping of Victoria's world. Born in a room filled with life, raised in one filled with silence. The contrast will define her. Warmth and duty, affection and restraint, love and loneliness intertwined. If you lost your first teacher before you learned your first word, how would that change the way you listen to the world? Would you learn to crave affection, or to fear it? The Duchess begins to plan. If her daughter is to survive in this uncertain court, she must be disciplined, controlled, prepared. Love will take second place to protection. It's safer that way. But safety has a cost. A child raised in glass can see everything but touch nothing. You can almost see it now. The corridors growing longer, the windows higher, the air colder. A small girl will soon wander them, always watched, never free. You can hear her small footsteps echoing before they even exist. For now, though, the baby sleeps again. Her father's funeral still days away, her future still unwritten. Her chest rises and falls, steady, rhythmic, peaceful. The room is quiet except for the faint ticking of a clock, each second carrying her further from her father's world, closer to her own. Can you feel it? That strange calm that follows sorrow. Not comfort, not joy, just the pause before life insists on continuing. You take a slow breath, letting your body soften. The fire crackles once more, faint but persistent. Outside, snow keeps falling, covering everything, grief, memory, even time, in a thin layer of mercy. Sleep now as she sleeps. Because tomorrow the girl will wake into a childhood of rules, mirrors, and locked doors. And you'll be there to walk beside her. The years begin to turn, quietly, like pages in a book. Outside the palace, London grows busier, noisier, the rhythm of an empire starting to hum. But within Kensington Palace, the air stays hushed, heavy with discipline. The little princess, now walking on unsteady legs, lives by a schedule carved in stone. Every movement, every word, every glance, observed, recorded, corrected. They call it the Kensington system. A set of rules so strict that childhood itself becomes a duty. The Duchess, still dressed in black, believes structure will protect her daughter from danger, from the court, from gossip, from heartbreak. But protection, when taken too far, can start to resemble imprisonment. You wander the palace corridors with her. The ceilings seem higher now, the shadows longer. Each footstep echoes as though it belongs to someone else. The air smells faintly of chalk and candle wax, the sense of lessons and long days. Servants glance downward as she passes, never meeting her eyes. And always, somewhere close behind, stands Sir John Conroy, her mother's advisor. His voice is low but sharp, polished by ambition. He watches the young princess with a gaze that feels more like measurement than concern. He has plans for her mother, plans for himself. Power in waiting. Can you imagine growing up knowing that even affection might hide an agenda? Would you still trust anyone's smile? Victoria is never allowed to be alone. Not for a moment. If she walks downstairs, an adult's hand must hold hers. If she sits by the window, someone stands behind her. Even sleep offers no solitude. She must share her mother's room night after night. The sound of two heartbeats, never one. Have you ever wanted to close a door and be truly unseen just once? Can you remember what freedom smelled like the first time you noticed it was gone? And yet, within those restrictions, something unexpected grows. A stubborn spark. The young princess begins to talk to herself in mirrors, her small reflection her only confidant. She invents stories about her dolls, gives them names and backstories, kingdoms and rivalries. In her mind, the palace becomes a stage, one she can control when the real world refuses her that right. You watch as she presses her forehead against cold glass, her breath fogging the pain. Outside, the gardens glisten with dew. She dreams of running through them without permission, of feeling grass instead of carpet beneath her feet. But the doors remain locked. Sometimes at night you hear her whisper, tiny prayers to a god she hopes can hear her better than the adults do. Her spaniel, Dash, curls at her feet, his warmth a small rebellion against the loneliness. You reach out, you can almost feel the silky fur beneath your fingertips. In that simple comfort, the child finds courage. Discipline continues. Languages, piano, posture, embroidery. Her tutor, Reverend Davis, teaches with patience, though his kind eyes sometimes drift toward pity. He sees the brightness in her, intelligence sharpened by isolation. He knows what's happening. Pressure turns coal to diamond, but it can also make it crack. Have you ever been told what to be before you learned who you are? Would you rebel quietly, or wait until the walls grew thin enough to break? One evening, after lessons, she sits at her desk copying Latin phrases. Her candle burns low, dripping wax like tears down its brass holder. The wind rattles the window panes, and somewhere in the hall a door slams. For a heartbeat, she's alone. Completely, gloriously alone. She looks around, realizing no one is watching. A smile flickers across her face, the first true one you've seen. She dips her pen into the ink and writes her name deliberately across the page. Victoria. Not Alexandrina, not child, not daughter. Just Victoria. Her own claim in her own hand. You feel something shift, almost imperceptibly, like the faint crack in ice before it gives way to spring. In this small act, freedom begins, quiet, handwritten, easily missed. Can you feel the change in the air? That trembling between obedience and awakening? The sense that one day the girl behind these locked doors will step through them and the world will never be the same? Outside, the last candle in the corridor goes out. The palace exhales into sleep. And you, watching the young princess close her book, rest her head on folded arms, know that tomorrow will bring both the same restrictions and the same growing defiance. The battle between control and spirit has begun. Let your breathing match hers. Slow, even. The kind of rhythm that carries strength through silence. The dawn slips softly into Kensington Palace. Golden light spills over tall windows, illuminating dust motes that drift like lazy snowflakes. The young princess sits cross-legged on the carpet, surrounded by her dolls, dozens of them arranged like courtiers at an invisible court. Each has a name, a title, a story. Victoria gives them voices, assigning one a French accent, another a Scottish lilt. Their porcelain faces listen faithfully. They never interrupt, never correct, never leave. This is how she learns power, and empathy, and imagination. In a world where every step is guided, these tiny creations are the only kingdom that belongs entirely to her. Have you ever talked to something that couldn't answer simply because no one else would listen? When the world felt too rigid, where did your imagination hide? Her governess watches from a polite distance, pretending not to hear the elaborate tales spilling from the child's lips. But Victoria knows she's being observed, she always is. So she keeps her true thoughts tucked behind small smiles, safe from adult interpretation. In secret, she invents companions no one can see. Heroes, explorers, and one courageous little dog who never leaves her side. That last one is real. His name is Dash. A Cavalier King Charles Spaniel with chestnut fur so glossy it catches light like silk. He follows her everywhere, through drawing rooms, gardens, even into lessons when he can sneak past the maids. Sometimes, during long afternoons of etiquette drills, Victoria hides a small biscuit in her sleeve for him. When he nibbles it from her hand under the table, she has to fight back a laugh. The joy feels dangerous, deliciously so. Can you picture the warmth of that tiny heartbeat pressed against her ankle under her gown? Would you risk punishment just to hear one small creature remind you that you're human? Dash becomes more than a pet. He becomes her freedom stitched in fur. He sleeps at the foot of her bed, nose buried in folds of lace, ears twitching at dreams only he understands. When nightmares wake her, echoes of footsteps, whispers in the dark, she reaches down and finds him there, breathing steadily, an anchor in the emptiness. In the palace gardens, when her governess turns away, she runs. Not far, not fast, but enough. Her shoes sink into the damp grass, her hair loosens in the wind, and Dash races ahead, barking in triumph. For a few stolen seconds, she forgets the Kensington system, forgets the crown waiting like a shadow on the horizon. She is simply a girl laughing in sunlight. What does freedom sound like to you? Is it the bark of a loyal friend, or the sound of your own laughter returning to you across open space? Sometimes in the evenings, Victoria sketches Dash curled beside her. Her drawings are delicate, not perfect, but full of affection. You can almost hear the scratch of pencil on paper, the slow exhale of concentration. When she's finished, she blows gently on the page to dry the ink, a soft gesture that feels like a kiss. The image captures more than likeness, it holds feeling. It's her way of saying I see you, in a house where no one truly sees her. Her mother notices the sketches and approves. Good practice for refinement, she says. But Victoria knows it's not refinement. It's resistance. Each drawing, each secret smile, each whispered story to her dog is a small rebellion against the life scripted by others. Have you ever resisted quietly, not by shouting but by creating something of your own? Can rebellion be gentle, like the stroke of graphite on paper? One rainy afternoon, thunder rolls above the palace roof. Lightning flashes, momentarily turning Dash's eyes to gold. The governess hurries to close the curtains, but Victoria whispers, let them stay open. She wants to watch the storm, to feel its honesty. Rain hammers the glass in relentless rhythm, washing the soot from London's air. It feels cleansing, like permission to feel something untidy. You stand beside her, watching the sky pulse silver, hearing the thunder fade into soft rain. And for a moment you realize something. Even within her prison, Victoria has found a door, invisible but open. A doorway built of imagination, loyalty, and quiet courage. She strokes Dash's fur, his tail wagging gently. The candles flicker in the dim light, their flames bending toward the window as if drawn to the storm. Outside, the world churns and changes, but inside this small room, the princess breathes easily. The rain's rhythm becomes her lullaby. As you listen, your own breathing slows to match hers, steady, calm, real. The palace walls no longer seem so cold. And you understand, every great life begins with small acts of defiance. Close your eyes for a moment. Can you see her, the girl, the dog, the storm? Can you feel the spark of someone destined for greatness, learning, in secret, what it means to be alive? Rest with that thought, because tomorrow the world outside these walls will begin to close in again. And the princess will have to learn not only how to dream, but how to survive the people who fear her dreams. Morning settles over Kensington like the turning of a slow, bright page. The air smells of ink, candle wax, and freshly pressed linen. Somewhere deep within the palace, a clock strikes 8, the start of lessons. The young princess straightens her back at the sound, her small hands folded neatly on the desk. Before her lies a slate, a quill, and a stack of carefully bound notebooks, their pages clean and waiting. Each one feels both like a promise and a cage. Her tutor, Reverend Davis, clears his throat softly. "Today, Your Highness," he begins, "we shall practice languages." His tone is polite but weary, the kind of voice that's grown accustomed to repeating itself. French in the morning, German before lunch, Italian by late afternoon. Words from distant lands fill her head, though she's never stepped beyond the palace gates. You can almost hear the rhythm of her day. Bonjour, guten Tag, buonasera. Syllables roll across her tongue like smooth stones in a stream. Each foreign word glitters with possibility, proof that there is life beyond these walls. Can you remember the first word that made you feel bigger than your world? A sound that opened a window in your mind? She practices handwriting next. Ink flows carefully across the page, the nib of her pen whispering against parchment. The smell of iron gall ink, faintly metallic, almost sweet, fills the room. A drop splashes onto her sleeve, but she doesn't flinch. Mistakes are not permitted. And yet, as you watch, you sense something alive in her precision, a quiet hunger to master the world through its words. Her governess, Baroness Lezen, hovers nearby, a stern but loyal presence. She insists that learning is a queen's first armor. "Knowledge will protect you when affection cannot," she often says. Victoria takes this to heart. Perhaps she doesn't yet know what affection truly feels like, but protection she understands. As hours stretch into afternoon, the sunlight tilts through the window, spilling gold across her desk. Her head begins to ache slightly from the effort, but she continues. Latin grammar, geography, history of kings she does not yet realize she'll join. A fly lands on her hand, and for a moment she envies it, small, free, unhindered by etiquette. Then she brushes it away, the gesture precise, almost royal. Have you ever studied something so long that it began to shape the way you thought, not just what you knew? When knowledge becomes armor, what happens to the heart beneath it? During a rare break, she sits by the window, dash curled beside her feet. She opens a book of French poetry, running her finger along the lines. Words blur together until one phrase catches her eye, Liberté chérie, beloved freedom. She whispers it aloud. The syllables feel dangerous, like flint against steel. Freedom, for her, is still just vocabulary, but already she savors its taste. Outside, rain begins to patter softly against the glass. The scent of wet earth drifts in through a crack in the frame. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, carts rattle, and distant voices fade into the hum of a city she's never walked freely through. You can sense her longing, not dramatic, just steady like a pulse under skin. She's learning about the world, but not yet allowed to live in it. Can you picture learning everything about oceans without ever touching water? Would you still dream of swimming? Evening falls. The last lesson is scripture. Reverend Davis reads from Psalms while Victoria copies verses onto parchment. Her handwriting is flawless, her posture perfect, but her gaze drifts toward the window, where the final light of day glows like fire through thin clouds. Each word she writes feels less like obedience, more like preparation. As if every line of text is a step toward a door she's not yet allowed to open. When the lesson ends, the Reverend bows and withdraws. Lezen closes the books, tucks them into a chest, and wishes her good night. For a brief, silent moment, Victoria remains at the desk. She traces one word into the condensation on the window. Freedom. Then she wipes it away before anyone can see. You watch her rise, candle in hand, the small flame lighting her face with gold. She walks slowly through the corridor, her slippers soundless against stone floors. Somewhere you sense the lessons are taking root. Language, knowledge, patience. All the quiet tools of a queen being forged in the furnace of restriction. If you were learning to rule a world you'd never touched, what would you hold on to? Knowledge, faith, or imagination? She pauses at the doorway, glancing once toward the moonlit window. Her reflection looks back at her, small, solemn, determined. Then she exhales, blows out the candle, and the room falls into darkness. Outside, the rain continues to fall, steady and cleansing. You breathe with her, slow and even, letting your thoughts settle like ink drying on paper. The night feels calm, the mind full, the heart uncertain. Tomorrow, destiny will begin to whisper louder, and she will start to hear its call. Night folds softly over Kensington, and the palace sleeps. But not everyone dreams easily. Somewhere, in a candlelit room filled with shadows and paperwork, the Duchess of Kent studies letters from the palace at St. James's. She reads by lamplight until her eyes ache, chasing every rumor of illness, scandal, and succession. Every whisper from court feels like a gust of wind moving the line of inheritance closer to her daughter. Victoria, meanwhile, is 12 years old now. Her handwriting neat, her posture precise, her heart still learning how to be both obedient and free. The air around her life is changing, faintly, invisibly, like the subtle shift before a storm. Each passing year removes another obstacle between her and the throne. Uncles without heirs. Cousins who do not survive. The royal family tree begins to narrow, its branches withering one by one until a single name remains. Hers. Can you feel that invisible pull? The strange gravity of destiny drawing closer, even when you never asked for it. She senses it long before anyone dares to tell her. At breakfast, her governess lowers her voice when certain letters arrive. Servants curtsy a little deeper, their eyes filled with something between respect and fear. Even Dash, her faithful dog, seems to feel the tension, pacing restlessly at her feet as though guarding a secret. In her lessons, she reads about kings who ruled too young and queens who ruled too long. She studies their portraits, faces framed in gold, painted centuries before, and feels them watching her. Their gaze seems to whisper, "Soon, child. Sooner than you think." If you knew greatness was coming, would you welcome it, or run? Would you cling to ordinary mornings while you still could? One evening, she overhears a conversation in the corridor. Her mother and Sir John Conroy speaking in hushed tones. The words drift through the door like cold air. When the king dies, she must be ready. The king. Her uncle William IV. Alive but old. Victoria freezes, her heartbeat quickening. For the first time, she understands what everyone has been preparing her for. She presses her hand against the wall, the plaster cool beneath her palm. The words "she must be ready" echo inside her like a bell. What does ready even mean? Ready to smile while others kneel? Ready to sign her name where her father once couldn't? Ready to be alone in a way that no one else on earth ever is? Outside, rain begins to fall, that slow English kind that seems to seep through stone. It taps against the window like a metronome of thought. She draws a finger through the fogged glass, sketching the shape of a crown without realizing it. The pattern melts away instantly, leaving only the blur of her reflection. How would it feel to see your future every time you looked into a mirror? Could you learn to love the image that everyone else already expects you to become? That night, she dreams of corridors lined with portraits that move as she passes. Each monarch turns their painted eyes toward her, whispering in languages she doesn't yet know. Latin, French, German, even the murmured syllables of the past. She walks faster, heart pounding, until she reaches the end of the gallery and finds not a door, but a window opening to endless sky. When she wakes, the pillow beneath her cheek is damp with tears. In the morning, sunlight streams across her desk. The governess greets her with the same calm smile, as though nothing has changed. But everything has. The air feels heavier. Even the ticking of the clock sounds louder, counting down to something unseen. You can almost sense it with her, the delicate moment between childhood and history, between freedom and duty. It's a balance the world rarely allows for long. As she closes her lesson book, a breeze slips through the open window. It carries the scent of rain-soaked roses from the garden below. For a second, it feels like a whisper, not from her governess, not from her mother, but from time itself. A quiet voice saying, "Prepare." And maybe you've heard that same voice once or twice when your own life was about to change. That soft, certain intuition that the road ahead will never again look like the one behind. Victoria straightens her spine, folds her hands, and lets the moment pass. Outside, clouds part and a single beam of sunlight falls across her face. The light feels both blessing and burden. She closes her eyes and breathes in deeply, the way a swimmer does before diving. The palace clock chimes again. 12 slow, solemn notes, each one a heartbeat closer to destiny. The night before it happens, London lies under a hush so complete that even the gas lamps seem to burn more softly. The King William IV is dying at Windsor. Miles away, inside Kensington Palace, the young princess sleeps, unaware that every heartbeat in her chest is counting down to history. The air is heavy with midsummer warmth. A candle guttering in the corridor throws faint gold across the door to her chamber. Downstairs, a messenger waits, boots damp from the long ride through the fog. He's been ordered not to disturb her until dawn. Outside, the first birds begin to stir. Have you ever felt the world changing while you were still dreaming? Can destiny arrive quietly without thunder or fanfare, just a knock on a door? At 5 o'clock that knock comes. Gentle at first, then firmer. The governess, Baroness Lezen, wakes with a start. She hurries to the bedside and whispers, "Your Royal Highness, you must rise. The Archbishop and the Lord Chamberlain are here." Victoria blinks, half awake, curls loose around her face. For a heartbeat she's still a child, blinking at dawn's light. Then the words settle, "The king is dead." Silence. Even the morning birds outside the window seem to pause. You can almost feel her heart steady itself before she speaks. She draws a breath, sits up, and says simply, "I am ready." The air in the room feels changed, thicker, charged, as though every atom now belongs to her. She throws a shawl around her shoulders and stands barefoot on the cool wooden floor. The messengers bow so low their voices tremble as they address her. "Your Majesty." The first time anyone has spoken those words to her. Can you imagine hearing a title that instantly ends your childhood? Would you feel pride or fear or both tangled together? She asks for a few minutes alone. It's her first royal command and they obey. When the door closes, the new queen moves toward the window. Early light pours in, pale and clean. Beyond the glass, the city stirs. Carriages, milkmen, the faraway toll of bells from St. Paul's. London has awakened to a new monarch, though most don't yet know it. She stands there quietly, hands clasped, and you can sense her thoughts. 18 years of confinement, lessons, rules, now collapsing into this one fragile moment of freedom. No one is watching. For the first time, she belongs to herself, and to everyone. The corridor outside fills with hushed movement. Servants lighting lamps, courtiers whispering titles they must relearn. The scent of coffee mingles with candle smoke. You breathe it in, it smells like both beginning and ending. If you were suddenly responsible for millions of lives, what would be your first act? Would you crave guidance or solitude? She kneels by the small writing desk where she used to practice her lessons. The same desk now holds state papers waiting for her signature. Her pen shakes only slightly as she writes her name, Victoria Regina. The letters flow with graceful certainty, as though her whole life has been preparing her hand for this. Outside, the palace gates open. Riders depart in all directions carrying the news. By noon, church bells will ring across the kingdom. By nightfall, the world will speak her name. But in this quiet hour, there is only her breath, slow and even, the sound of destiny settling into place. She rises, walks toward the mirror, and studies her reflection. The same pale face, the same bright eyes, but different now. The weight of a nation has no visible shape, yet you can almost see it resting gently on her shoulders. How does one prepare to be the symbol of an empire? Can anyone truly choose the moment they grow up? Lezen re-enters softly, eyes shining with tears she tries to hide. "Your Majesty," she whispers again. Victoria nods, calm but trembling inside. Then, with quiet resolve, she says, "Let them come." And they do. Ministers, bishops, courtiers, each bowing deeply before the young woman standing barefoot in the morning light. The room smells of roses from the garden below and candle wax melting slowly into the brass holders. Her dog Dash waits just outside the door, ears perked, unaware that his companion has become the most powerful woman in the world. As you watch her lift her chin, meeting the eyes of men twice her age without flinching, you feel a strange peace settle over the room. History has begun, not with a roar, but with a whisper. Take a breath with her, steady, deliberate. Feel the stillness that follows transformation, the calm before ceremony. The girl who once longed for freedom has stepped into her fate. And as the sun climbs higher over London, its light pouring through the windows of Kensington Palace, you sense it too. The world has turned and something new has begun to breathe. The door closes behind the last official, and for the first time in her entire life, Victoria is alone. Not watched, not guarded, not corrected, just alone. The silence feels enormous. It presses softly against her ears, not empty but full. Of breath, of heartbeat, of freedom she's never tasted. She moves slowly across the room, barefoot on the cool wooden floor. The morning air drifts through the half-open window, carrying the scent of roses and city smoke. The sounds of London are faint. A bell ringing somewhere, the clip of hooves on wet stone, the low murmur of distant life. She exhales. The world outside has already changed, and so has she. Can you remember your first moment truly alone? The instant when the air itself felt different because it finally belonged to you? She walks toward the mirror again, the same one she'd faced as a child, when lessons and governesses and rules filled every hour. Now it reflects someone she's still learning to recognize. Her eyes are bright but calm. Her hair slightly untidy, freed from the perfect braids of yesterday. She sees not a girl, not yet a monarch, something in between. Someone crossing a threshold invisible to everyone else. At the small desk near the window, the pen she used to copy Latin still rests beside the inkwell. She dips it carefully and writes just 2 words in her journal. I am. Then she pauses, watching the ink soak into the paper. It's a declaration, not a sentence. For the first time, she exists on her own terms. How would it feel to define yourself in a single heartbeat? To realize no one will ever call you child again? A clock ticks somewhere, marking this first quiet hour of reign. The rhythm comforts her. She listens closely, tick-tock like breath, like time learning her name. Victoria. Not little Dina. Not the child. Simply Victoria, the sound of sovereignty in motion. She crosses to the window and looks out over the gardens of Kensington. The grass still shimmers with dew, and the light glints off the pond like scattered coins. A gardener straightens as he sees her silhouette against the glass. He hesitates, then bows awkwardly, uncertain of protocol. She smiles, a small human smile, and raises her hand in acknowledgement. A gesture both ordinary and eternal. The breeze catches her hair. She closes her eyes. For the first time, no one tells her what to do with it. No one rushes to pin it back into propriety. She lets it fall freely against her neck. A tiny rebellion, but perhaps the first real act of power she's ever taken. Can power begin in something as simple as letting yourself breathe? Can freedom sound like silence? The room holds its breath with her. Somewhere below, the palace hums with renewed order. Footmen moving briskly, servants whispering, Her Majesty prefers this. Her Majesty commands that. But up here in this bright chamber, the noise cannot reach her. She has created a kingdom of quiet. Her gaze drifts toward a portrait of her late father. He looks younger than she remembers, almost the same age she is now. She wonders what he would say if he could see her like this, barefoot, steady, sovereign. Would he have told her it was possible to be both gentle and powerful? Would he have told her that loneliness comes as part of the crown? You feel her thoughts as if they were your own. That ache of wanting to be seen by someone who never lived long enough to witness your becoming. It's a universal pain. The wish to show the ones we've lost that we kept going, that we became something. A single tear slides down her cheek. She wipes it away quickly, almost instinctively. The world will see her face soon enough. For now, she allows herself one moment of truth before the mask of monarchy descends. The door knocks softly, Lezen's voice hesitant. Your Majesty? They are ready for you. Victoria turns, composed once more. Tell them I shall come presently, she says, her voice calm, low, and certain. She glances around the room one last time. The ink drying in her journal. The faint ripple of curtains in the breeze. The pale morning light stretching across the floor like an open path. And for that brief, sacred moment, the world seems to pause for her. As though history itself is waiting, politely, at the threshold. You can feel it too, can't you? That small shiver of transformation when solitude becomes strength. When the person you were steps aside for the one you are meant to be. She takes a slow, deliberate breath. Then another. And finally she moves toward the door. Each step a soft echo of grace and resolve. Beyond it lies ceremony, politics, expectation, and eternity. But behind it, in this quiet room, remains something precious. The memory of her first hour alone. The hour when she stopped being a child and began being history. The corridors of Buckingham Palace are still new to her. The scent of fresh plaster and beeswax polish lingers, mixed with faint traces of paint and candle smoke. This place, her new home, feels brighter than Kensington, less oppressive, yet strangely empty. The ceilings stretch high above her, the marble floors gleam like frozen water. Each step she takes echoes softly, reminding her how alone she is in this vast new kingdom. The move to Buckingham marks the beginning of everything. Independence, power, scrutiny. But also the beginning of mentorship. For even queens must learn how to rule. Enter Lord Melbourne, Prime Minister, scholar, politician. A man with tired eyes and the calm, careful speech of someone who's learned to wait before choosing words. The first time she meets him, Victoria feels both awe and relief. He bows low but not stiffly. His presence carries warmth, a quiet gravity. When he looks up at her, there is no trace of intimidation, only kindness. Can you picture that moment? A young queen barely 18, facing the seasoned statesman who would become her guide? Can you feel the electricity of recognition when two lives meet at the exact point where each needs the other most? Melbourne's voice is smooth, deliberate. Every sentence unfolds like a lesson disguised as conversation. He explains constitutional custom, parliamentary procedure, the art of listening without agreeing. He never rushes her, never scolds. Instead, he teaches her how to turn thought into authority. Victoria, eager but untested, listens intently. She sits upright, hands folded neatly on the desk, her heart pounding in quiet rhythm with his words. Each new piece of knowledge feels like a key turning in a lock. The palace feels different when he's there. Less a fortress, more a classroom filled with sunlight and possibilities. Your Majesty, he says one morning, there is power in restraint. A monarch's strength lies not in command but in judgment. She nods, though part of her wants to argue. She spent her whole life being restrained. Now she wants to act, to decide, to be. But she senses he's right. Power isn't about noise. It's about timing. Have you ever had someone in your life who seemed to understand you before you spoke? Someone who saw both your flaws and your promise and didn't flinch? In those early months, Melbourne becomes that person for her. He visits almost daily, and the palace staff begins to whisper, affectionately, Lord M. Together, they share tea and papers at her desk. Sometimes they discuss state matters. Other times, poetry or politics or life itself. He quotes Shakespeare. She laughs and answers with German proverbs her governess taught her. He listens to her ideas with patience rare in a world ruled by men. He never interrupts, only tilts his head, weighing her thoughts like a jeweler inspecting a rare gem. To her, he becomes something between a father figure and a friend. A steady presence where once there had been only rules and shadows. Your Majesty, he tells her one day, lead as yourself. You are not your uncles. You are not your mother. The crown may be old, but you are new. Let that be your strength. She feels his words settle deep inside her, like seeds planted in fertile soil. In time, they will grow roots strong enough to carry her through decades. Can wisdom ever arrive too early, or does it only bloom when we're ready to hear it? What lessons in your own life took years to understand fully? Outside the palace, the world spins on. Political debates, industrial progress, the hum of a modernizing empire. But inside these walls, a quiet transformation is taking place. The girl who once feared to walk alone down a staircase is now beginning to shape the destiny of a nation. She writes in her diary that night, Lord M. has been most kind. I feel so grateful. His manner is so gentle, yet his mind is so strong. Her handwriting flows quickly, a reflection of how alive her thoughts feel. The candle flickers beside her, casting warm light over the ink as she writes. The sound of the nib scratching across paper is soft and steady. Outside, the city hums, a reminder that while she learns, millions live by the consequences of her lessons. She sets down her pen, closes the journal, and exhales. The room smells faintly of ink, roses, and faint with smoke from the distant hearth. Her eyelids grow heavy, and in that drowsy space between waking and sleep, she hears Melbourne's calm voice again. Restraint, Your Majesty, but never silence. The words linger, echoing softly through the corridors of her mind. A promise that the teacher has given the student everything she'll need. not just to rule but to endure. And as the palace settles into night, the soft rhythm of her breathing joins the eternal pulse of history, steady, deliberate becoming. Morning mist curls around Westminster Abbey, turning its Gothic towers into pale ghosts against the sky. London is awake earlier than usual, streets crowded with onlookers wrapped in shawls and curiosity. The air smells of rain and horsehair and freshly trampled grass. From every direction, you can hear the mingled sounds of excitement. Carriage wheels, brass bands tuning, bells tolling from far-off spires. Inside the palace, Victoria sits very still while her maids fasten the last hooks of her white gown. The satin whispers as they move. Her small frame almost disappears beneath layers of silk and velvet, yet her eyes hold a clarity that cuts through the morning haze. Outside her window, the city waits. Can you imagine dressing for a moment that will echo for centuries? Would you tremble, or would the stillness come, that strange calm before every leap? A light knock. Your Majesty, the carriage is ready. She nods, rises, and the great weight of the robe settles on her shoulders. The crown will come later, but even this fabric feels heavy with expectation. The ride to the Abbey takes less than an hour, though it feels outside of time. Crowds press close along the route, waving flags, shouting her name. God save the Queen. Children lifted onto shoulders catch glimpses of white silk through the carriage glass. Victoria's gloved hand lifts in a small wave. Her smile, soft, genuine, ripples through the crowd like light across water. Have you ever felt thousands of eyes upon you and still managed to breathe easily? What would you think of to stay calm when the whole world seems to be watching? The Abbey's great doors open. Incense drifts out, blending with the scent of candle wax and damp stone. She steps inside and the world's noise falls away. The silence of history is a living thing here. Centuries of coronations, prayers, and secrets absorbed into the walls. The organ begins its deep, slow music, vibrating through the floor into the soles of her feet. Every sound is magnified, the echo of each footstep, the rustle of silk, the soft cough of a nervous bishop. You can almost feel the texture of the flagstones beneath her shoes, cool and faintly uneven. She walks the long aisle toward the throne. Light streams through stained glass, painting the path in crimson and blue. Each color seems alive, shifting gently with the morning sun. As she passes, nobles bow, courtiers murmur, and the whispers of admiration follow her like a blessing. At the altar, she kneels. The archbishop's voice fills the vast space, solemn, trembling slightly with age. When he touches the anointing oil to her forehead, the scent of frankincense and orange blossoms rises into the air. It smells like faith and finality, the fragrance of destiny accepted. Can you sense the moment something invisible becomes real? When promise turns into permanence. The crown is lifted, heavy gold, thick with jewels that shimmer like captured stars. For a breath, it hangs suspended above her head, then settles into place. Its weight surprises her. Not unbearable, but undeniable. She exhales, steady and slow, as if adjusting to the feel of power pressing down. The congregation kneels. Trumpets sound. The abbey erupts in song, voices soaring through arches that seem to touch heaven. The melody fills every corner, vibrating in your ribs if you listen closely enough. Outside, the roar of the crowd swells again, echoing through the stone walls. The world knows. Queen has risen. Victoria's gaze drifts upward, following a beam of colored light spilling across the vaulted ceiling. For a moment, she forgets the ceremony and just breathes. The light looks alive, dust motes drifting through it like stars. She thinks of her father, her childhood, of all the years that led her here. Each rule, each restriction, each whispered dream. Do you believe destiny waits patiently, or does it chase us until we turn to face it? When she leaves the abbey hours later, the sky has cleared. The damp air feels lighter, almost celebratory. Her robes trail behind her, glinting faintly in the sunlight. The cheers outside strike her like waves, loud, chaotic, but strangely soothing. For once, she doesn't shrink from the noise. She lets it wash over her, a sound of belonging. In the carriage back to Buckingham, she leans against the velvet seat. Her hand rests on the crown in her lap, fingers tracing the cool metal. The jewels catch bits of light, scattering them across her white gown. She smiles, not with triumph, but with quiet resolve. The moment has passed, but the life it begins stretches far ahead, unseen. You watch her through the carriage window as London blurs by, crowds fading into haze, flags drooping as the day wanes. And you wonder, when history crowns you, what part of yourself must you set aside to carry it? The horses' hooves beat their steady rhythm on the cobblestones. Each sound feels like a heartbeat, each breath a promise. And as the carriage disappears into the golden light of evening, the new queen, no longer a girl, rides toward her future, the weight of empire resting gently, irrevocably upon her shoulders. The crown has settled, but the world beneath it still feels uncertain. In the first year of her reign, Victoria wakes every morning with the same thought. How does one learn to rule? Buckingham Palace hums with new life. Servants move quietly through halls that still smell faintly of fresh paint and polish. Sunlight filters through tall windows, catching dust in slow golden swirls. From her writing desk, Victoria can see the gardens, neatly trimmed, perfectly ordered, a reflection of the discipline she's determined to bring to herself. Each morning begins the same way. A tray of tea and letters. A small fire whispering in the grate. The weight of paperwork, parliamentary reports, petitions, foreign updates, stacked neatly beside her breakfast. Have you ever begun a new chapter of life determined to do everything right, even as you quietly fear making your first mistake? She studies every paper, every name. Her pen moves carefully across the pages, signing Victoria R. at the bottom of each document. The ink glistens briefly before it dries, a small, tangible symbol of authority. Sometimes she catches herself staring at her own signature, marveling that it now changes the lives of thousands she'll never meet. When Lord Melbourne visits, the air in the room softens. He enters with his usual calm and the faint scent of tobacco and lavender soap. They sit opposite each other, papers spread between them like maps of an empire she's only begun to explore. He guides her gently, explaining matters of state, the balance of parliament, the importance of patience. You will be criticized either way, he says with a small smile. So you may as well choose the path that feels true. Victoria laughs, softly but with real warmth. She feels herself growing into the role, one day at a time, like a tree taking root. The palace no longer feels like a borrowed place. It is slowly becoming home. Can you recall a time when responsibility first felt natural, when what once frightened you began to feel like purpose? Yet even in this newfound confidence, loneliness lingers. She dines alone most evenings, the long table stretching endlessly ahead, candles flickering in the silence. Her dog, Dash, sits at her feet, the only one who doesn't bow before her. When she looks at him, she sees something familiar, unconditional affection untouched by politics or power. Sometimes after dinner, she walks the corridors barefoot, just to feel the cold marble against her skin. It reminds her she's still human beneath the velvet and gold. Her footsteps echo softly, a private rhythm within a palace meant for ceremony. The public at first adores her. A young queen, earnest, beautiful, full of promise. Crowds gather when she appears on the balcony, cheering as if youth itself has returned to England. The sound rises like the sea, steady, relentless, overwhelming. She smiles and waves, but beneath the applause, doubt whispers. Will they still cheer when I make a mistake? Would you want to live a life where every gesture, every word was remembered forever? Could you bear to be both loved and judged in the same breath? Her first great test comes quietly. A political dispute, minor at first, grows into a storm. Two ministers argue over appointments, and somehow Victoria is caught in the middle. Her choice, simple on paper, offends one side and pleases another. The newspapers seize upon it, their ink sharp as daggers. The queen shows favoritism. Inexperience clouds the crown. For the first time, she feels the sting of public scrutiny. Each headline is a mirror reflecting not her truth, but others' perceptions of her. She reads every word even when she shouldn't. Her heart beats faster with each page, embarrassment mixing with defiance. She writes in her diary that night, her hand trembling slightly. It is not easy to do right when one's every act is watched. She closes the book, exhales, and lets her shoulders drop. The fire crackles softly. Outside, rain taps gently against the windows. She leans back, eyes closing, listening to the quiet. Can you remember the moment you first realized that doing your best still wouldn't please everyone? Did it make you smaller or stronger? The next morning, she rises earlier than usual. The sky outside is pale gray, and a light mist hangs over the gardens. When Melbourne arrives, she greets him with a steadier voice. "I must learn to stand firm," she says simply. He smiles, his eyes warm with approval. "And so you shall, ma'am." Later that day, Victoria walks out onto the balcony once more. The crowd below is smaller now, muted, uncertain. She waves anyway. Not out of vanity, but because courage is sometimes nothing more than showing up again after you've stumbled. The cheers that follow are softer than before, but more meaningful. They sound like trust rediscovered, like the slow rebuilding of faith. As evening descends, she writes again. "Perhaps the crown is not meant to make me greater, but steadier." Her pen glides across the page, the candle flickering beside her. The ink dries, her eyelids grow heavy, and she lets the day fade away. Outside, the rain has stopped. The city sleeps under a damp, silvery hush. And inside the palace, a young queen learns the quiet art of endurance. One breath, one choice, one dawn at a time. Rain taps gently against the palace windows, a soft, steady rhythm like a heartbeat echoing through marble halls. It's autumn, and the air carries the scent of wet leaves and cold iron. Servants move quietly, lighting candles that cast golden halos against the walls. In the heart of this calm, Victoria waits. She's been told her cousin, Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, will arrive this morning. Her uncle has written endlessly of him. His virtues, his manners, his mind. Still, she's skeptical. Marriage has always felt like a distant concept, a polite obligation she could postpone indefinitely. But fate often chooses moments like this, quiet, ordinary mornings, to shift the course of history. Can you remember the first time someone walked into your life and, in an instant, everything around you seemed to breathe differently? The clock in the corridor strikes 11. A carriage stops outside. She hears voices, footsteps, then the door opening. And there he is. Albert bows deeply, and for a moment she forgets to breathe. He's taller than she imagined, his expression both reserved and kind. Dark curls frame a face both youthful and thoughtful. There's a softness in his eyes that doesn't belong in politics or court. He straightens and their gazes meet. Something unspoken passes between them, curiosity, perhaps recognition. Time for a heartbeat feels suspended. "Your Majesty," he says quietly. The way he speaks, gentle, accented, turns the title into music. She smiles without meaning to. The room feels warmer. Even the air seems to hum with something new. They talk for hours that first day. Not about treaties or thrones, but about books, music, art. Albert speaks with passion about the power of progress. Railways, education, science. Victoria listens, her usual reserve melting away. She finds herself laughing. Real laughter, the kind that surprises even her. He asks questions that no one else ever has. "What do you love most about ruling?" he asks. She pauses, considering. Then answers softly, "The chance to do something that lasts beyond me." Have you ever met someone who didn't just listen to your words, but seemed to hear you entirely? When Albert plays the piano for her later, the notes seem to fill every corner of the room. The melody is delicate, almost hesitant, like a conversation carried on without speech. Outside, the rain continues to fall, each drop catching the fading afternoon light. Victoria sits perfectly still, yet something inside her begins to move. A shift, a realization, that perhaps the life she's built, one of duty, solitude, and strength, has room for something more. Days pass and the palace feels different. She finds herself thinking of him during meetings, smiling at the thought of his shy politeness, his quiet certainty. Her diary fills with small details. He is most amiable, so kind, such sweetness and sincerity. Each entry grows more tender, more certain. And yet, with that certainty comes fear. Love, she realizes, is not a crown one can wear lightly. It requires surrender, something she's never been taught. Can power and love truly coexist? Or must one always bend to the other? When Albert prepares to leave, the palace feels emptier than before he came. Victoria walks with him to the entrance. Outside, the carriage waits under gray skies. The smell of rain and horsehair fills the air again. She hesitates. Protocol demands distance. But the heart rarely asks permission. Taking a small breath, she steps forward. Her gloved hand touches his. It's a brief, unspoken moment. Two souls recognizing something ancient and inevitable. "Goodbye, Your Majesty," he says softly. She answers only with a smile, though her eyes say more. The carriage pulls away, wheels whispering over wet cobblestones. She watches until it disappears around the bend. The sound fades, leaving only rain and the quiet beat of her own pulse. That night, she sits by the window, the crown resting on a nearby table. That heavy symbol of everything she's carried alone. The reflection in the glass shows two versions of herself, the queen and the woman. And for the first time, she wonders if they can ever truly become one. Her diary opens again, the pen trembling slightly between her fingers. It was with some emotion that I beheld Albert. He is perfection. She closes the book. The candlelight dances against the window pane. Outside, the city sleeps. Inside, a heart long disciplined by duty begins quietly to awaken. Have you ever realized that the moment your life begins to change feels deceptively calm? Like the air right before a storm? The rain has stopped now. The clouds are breaking, revealing a thin streak of silver moonlight over Buckingham's roof. Victoria exhales, feeling both fear and peace intertwined. Somewhere far away, Albert is looking at the same moon. Neither knows it yet, but the threads of their lives have already begun to weave into one. And as she finally closes her eyes, the night settles softly around her. A promise, a whisper, a beginning. Autumn turns to winter, and with it, the palace grows quiet again. The laughter that once echoed through the corridors has faded, replaced by the soft hum of wind against the windows. The leaves outside have fallen, leaving the gardens bare and still. Each morning, frost glitters across the lawns like powdered glass. Albert has returned to Germany, and Victoria feels his absence like a space in the air beside her, something invisible but constant. She continues her duties, signing papers, attending meetings, hosting dinners. Yet beneath the ritual, her thoughts drift again and again toward him. The ink in her diary deepens. Her handwriting becomes more fluid, almost intimate. He's always in my thoughts. I miss his presence, his calm. Can you recall the strange ache of missing someone you've only just begun to know? That quiet certainty that distance cannot quite extinguish? The letters begin. They arrive in cream-colored envelopes sealed with red wax, the handwriting precise, almost shy. Each one carries a small trace of him, the faint scent of pressed flowers or candle smoke, the deliberate slant of his pen. She opens the first one slowly, heart fluttering in her chest. My dearest cousin, it begins. He writes about his studies, the weather in Coburg, a concert he attended. Nothing romantic, yet everything personal. His tone is steady, polite, and beneath it, a warmth she can feel between the lines. She writes back immediately. My dear Albert, she begins, and pauses, smiling at how easily the words come. Have you ever felt that writing to someone made them feel closer than speaking ever could? As if the paper itself remembers the touch of your hand? Days become weeks. Their letters cross oceans and borders, carried by couriers through snow and storm. She reads his replies by firelight, her fingertips brushing the edges of the pages as though she could trace his presence there. In one letter, he mentions a song he has written for her. In another, he includes a small sketch of his dog Eos. Victoria finds herself laughing softly at his modest humor, his tendency to apologize even when unnecessary. She replies with sketches of her own, describing palace life, the scent of roses in her garden, the chaos of her court. Each new letter feels like a breath of color returning to a gray room. And yet, not everyone approves. Her advisors whisper about politics and caution. Too soon, Your Majesty, one tells her gently. You must not let emotion cloud your duty. She nods politely, but inside, something in her rebels. For once, she is not guided by obligation, but by something older, deeper, truer. Would you listen to reason, or to the quiet certainty in your chest that says, this is right? Winter deepens. Snow falls softly over London, muffling the sound of carriages and bells. At night, the city glows in candlelight reflected on frost. In her chamber, Victoria sits by the fire, reading Albert's latest letter. His words are simple. Though distance separates us, I think of you with warmth and respect. If ever I may serve you, not as prince but as friend, you have only to say the word. She reads the line again, slower this time, then sets the letter on her lap, staring into the flames. The fire pops softly, the light catching the gold thread on her gown. Can you feel that moment, when affection becomes something you can no longer ignore? When it stops being a comfort and becomes a calling? A new year approaches. The bells of London ring through the frozen air, carrying with them the hum of anticipation. In the palace, Victoria stands at her window, watching fireworks bloom faintly over the Thames. She thinks of him, not as a distant cousin or a royal match, but as the one person who sees her beyond the crown. Her breath fogs the glass as she whispers, barely audible, "I must see him again." The decision forms slowly, like dawn breaking after a long night. She cannot wait for fate or advisors or politics to decide for her. She is the queen. And for the first time, she realizes that means she can choose, not only for the empire but for her own heart. In her diary that night, she writes a single sentence: "I will send for Albert." The words glow softly in the candlelight, as though they contain their own quiet fire. Outside, snow continues to fall, silent, endless, beautiful. Each flake settles on the cold stone of the palace, layering softly, patiently, like the slow build of something inevitable. And in that silence, between one breath and the next, history begins to turn again. Not through war or decree, but through a letter, a decision, and a queen who dared to love. Morning mist lingers low over the gardens at Windsor Castle, soft and pearly in the early light. The air carries that particular scent of English winter: damp grass, distant wood smoke, a trace of frost melting beneath the first touch of sun. Inside, the halls are quiet except for the soft rustle of maids preparing fires and the faint ticking of clocks. Somewhere, far down the corridor, footsteps echo. Victoria stands by the window of her private sitting room, gloved hands clasped before her. Her reflection stares back at her, young, pale, composed, yet beneath it all, trembling with something she hasn't felt before: anticipation. Albert is returning. After months of letters, of distance, of quiet longing disguised as diplomacy, he is here at last. Can you imagine waiting for someone so intently that the world itself seems to pause around you? That every heartbeat becomes a countdown to a single moment? A carriage arrives in the courtyard below. The sound of wheels over gravel echoes like a whisper through the cold air. She leans slightly forward, eyes following the motion until she sees him step down. The same calm grace, the same thoughtful eyes, yet something feels different. Perhaps it's her. When he's announced at the door, her composure nearly breaks. "Show him in," she says softly, her voice steady only because she wills it so. Albert enters, bows deeply. "Your Majesty." But formality feels like a fragile shell around them, ready to crack at the first word. When she tells him to rise, he does, and for the briefest instant, their eyes meet, and the months of absence vanish. Feels like breathing after a long dive underwater. "Albert," she begins and then falters. All her rehearsed phrases, the elegant, diplomatic ones, scatter like leaves in the wind. Have you ever stood at the edge of a moment that could change everything, and realized you had no script for it? She turns away, walks toward the window, needing movement to quiet her racing thoughts. The light catches her brooch, a small glimmer of gold against the dark fabric of her gown. Behind her, he waits, still respectful, his hands clasped lightly. At last she turns back. "I have thought much," she says, her tone formal at first, "and I find that I must see you again, not as duty commands, but because my heart does." Albert's expression doesn't change immediately, but his eyes soften, and his breath catches almost imperceptibly. Victoria steps closer. No attendants, no court, no counsel, just the two of them, bound by history and something deeper. She lowers her gaze, then lifts it again, decided. "Albert," she says, her voice barely above a whisper, "I wish you to be my husband." The words hang in the air, simple, unadorned, yet enormous. For a moment, there's only silence, like the pause between lightning and thunder. Albert blinks, visibly moved. "Your Majesty," he says softly, "it is I who am honored. With all my heart I accept." And there it is, the moment when empire yields to emotion, when centuries of tradition bend quietly before love. Would you have had the courage to speak first, knowing the world might not understand? To risk dignity for the sake of truth? They stand close now, neither needing words. The faint crackle of the fire fills the room. Outside, the morning fog begins to lift, revealing the first shy rays of sunlight over the castle gardens. Victoria reaches out, touches his hand. His fingers close around hers, warm, grounding. The air feels charged, yet peaceful, like something sacred has been acknowledged. He smiles, small, sincere, utterly unguarded. And in that smile, she sees her future not as a crown, but as a shared journey. Later, when Albert departs to prepare for the formal announcement, she remains by the window, watching the fog drift across the river below. Her pulse still hums in her ears, steady and strong. She writes in her diary before noon, unable to wait. I said to him that it would make me very happy if he would consent to marry me. He seemed much moved, and I was so happy to see him. The words are simple, almost childlike. But behind them lies something extraordinary. A queen who dared to choose her own heart's command. Can love and duty truly coexist, or must one always kneel before the other? What happens when a woman raised to rule decides that ruling alone is no longer enough? Outside, the bells of Windsor begin to ring, their echoes rolling through the misty air. In every sound, there's both promise and beginning. The cold morning feels softer now, touched by warmth that seems to come from within. Victoria closes her eyes for a moment, her hand resting lightly on the glass. For the first time, the crown no longer feels like a burden, it feels like something she can share. The queen who had learned duty will now learn devotion. And as the winter sun rises, the light spilling across her face, you sense that history itself has shifted, quietly, gracefully, permanently. The morning of February 10, 1840, dawns cold and luminous. London is wrapped in a fine mist, the kind that softens sound and blurs the sharp edges of stone and glass. Yet beneath that veil, the city hums with anticipation. Church bells toll through the haze, their echoes drifting over rooftops and river. Carriages line the streets, boots strike the cobblestones, and thousands gather to witness something they have never seen before. A queen marrying for love. Inside St. James's Palace, Victoria stands before a long mirror. Her gown of pure white satin shimmers faintly in the candlelight. The lace, fine as spider silk, flows around her shoulders and down to the floor. It is simple by royal standards, yet radiant. She has chosen it herself. No jewels, no tiara, only a wreath of orange blossoms in her dark hair. Have you ever dressed not to impress the world, but to feel completely yourself in a single moment? The room smells faintly of beeswax, flowers, and the metallic tang of morning rain. Her ladies move quietly behind her, adjusting folds of fabric, checking each detail with reverent care. Yet Victoria hardly sees them. Her reflection holds her attention, a woman still young but no longer a girl. Her hands tremble slightly as she adjusts her veil. A knock. The carriage awaits, Your Majesty. She turns, takes a slow breath, and steps forward. Outside, the air feels crisp against her skin. Crowds line the route, faces lifted, voices rising as her carriage passes. Flags flutter. Somewhere, someone shouts her name, and the cheer rolls down the street like a wave of warmth. She smiles, nervous, glowing, entirely real. The people cheer louder. Can you imagine the strange power of being both bride and monarch? Both adored and observed, every step watched, every heartbeat shared with millions? When the carriage stops before St. James's Chapel Royal, she pauses before stepping down. The music drifts through the open doors, soft strings, solemn and tender. Inside, the air glows with candlelight and the scent of lilies. Marble floors gleam underfoot. Rows of nobles, ministers, and foreign guests stand waiting, the jewels at their throats catching the light like frozen stars. Albert. He stands at the altar, dressed in a field marshal's uniform of scarlet and gold. For a moment, the world narrows to just him. Her heart stirs like a bird taking flight. She has seen grandeur before, but never beauty that feels alive. Their eyes meet and everything else dissolves. The crowd, the cameras, even the centuries of protocol. Only two people remain in that ancient, echoing space. She walks toward him slowly, her gown whispering across the stone. Each step feels both heavy and light, like walking toward destiny and home at once. The organ's notes swell around her, rich and sonorous, wrapping her in sound. At the altar, Albert bows his head slightly as she joins him. His hands tremble just enough to reveal his nerves. He looks at her, truly looks, and the quiet exchange between them says more than any vow. The Archbishop's voice rises, steady and formal. Words centuries old spill into the air. To have and to hold, to love and to cherish. When she speaks her vows, her voice is clear, strong, yet almost musical. It carries through the chapel like a promise that belongs to history. Then Albert repeats his own, his accent thickening on the word love. It makes her smile. Would you ever dare to bind your heart in front of a world that would record every syllable? To speak love as both duty and defiance? When the ring slides onto her finger, her breath catches. The gold is warm from his touch. The congregation exhales collectively, and a single shaft of sunlight pierces through the stained glass, falling directly on them. Even the air feels sacred for a heartbeat. And then, music. The choir begins a hymn, its melody swelling through the vaulted arches, blending with the scent of flowers and wax and joy. The moment feels eternal, like time itself has stopped to listen. Afterward, when they leave the chapel, the city erupts. Cheers, music, the thunder of artillery salutes echo across the Thames. The white horses of her carriage gleam in the pale light as petals fall from balconies above. Victoria glances at Albert beside her, his expression quiet, full of awe, and she reaches for his hand discreetly, hidden beneath the folds of her gown. Their fingers touch. He squeezes once, and for all the pomp surrounding them, that single touch feels like the real beginning. That evening, after the banquet and endless congratulations, the palace finally grows still. The corridors that had rung with laughter now echo only with faint footsteps and the distant hum of a city celebrating into the night. In her private chambers, Victoria removes her veil. Her hair is loose now, her face bare, her crown gone. Albert enters quietly, candlelight tracing his profile. No words, just the soft rustle of fabric, the warmth of shared presence, and the sense that something immense yet peaceful has settled between them. For the first time since childhood, she feels completely safe. Not because she is queen, but because she is understood. She writes in her diary that night, "I never spent such an evening. My dearest, dear Albert, his excessive love and affection gave me feelings of heavenly love and happiness." Her handwriting trembles slightly. You can almost see the glow in the ink, the kind that memory will never fade. Have you ever had a moment so beautiful, you knew even then that it would live inside you forever? Outside, the city still sparkles, lamps burning low, fireworks fading into the fog. The river glimmers with reflections of red and gold. And high above it all, within the quiet of the palace, two young souls who have carried the weight of nations find a small, private peace. The girl who once feared the loneliness of power has found her equal. The queen who ruled alone now rules with love beside her. And as the night deepens, the story of Victoria and Albert truly begins, not as legend, but as life. The first days of marriage unfold like a dream painted in warm light and quiet laughter. Buckingham Palace feels transformed, its once echoing corridors now alive with voices, music, and the soft rhythm of two lives intertwining. Where once there was duty and protocol, there is now presence. Victoria wakes earlier than usual, not to read state papers, but because she can hear Albert whistling faintly down the hall. A cheerful, unguarded sound, the kind one makes when the world is still asleep. It's small, ordinary, and yet to her, it feels like sunlight. Can you remember a sound that once made a lonely place feel like home again? They breakfast together, a quiet ritual away from the eyes of courtiers. Tea, toast, marmalade, and conversation that drifts easily between art, science, and small domestic things. Albert sketches as he talks. Designs for gardens, plans for better sanitation in the city, inventions he believes will change the world. His mind hums like machinery, always turning, always imagining. Victoria listens, sometimes teasing him gently. "Not every problem can be solved with blueprints, dearest," she says. Albert smiles, replying, "But many hearts can be mended with purpose." She writes that down later. Feels like something worth remembering. Have you ever met someone whose faith in the future made you believe in it too? But love within a palace is never simple. There are eyes everywhere, ministers, courtiers, the press, all eager to see whether their queen will remain her own sovereign, or if this new prince will become the hidden power behind the throne. Rumors whisper like drafts through the marble halls. At first, Victoria resists any sign that Albert might influence her politically. She is still the monarch, her word must remain final. The arguments, when they come, are brief but sharp. Two strong minds, two different worlds colliding. Once, after a heated exchange over a cabinet decision, she storms out, cheeks flushed, heart pounding. In her private chamber, she stands before the mirror and asks herself, "Must I yield to love in order to keep it?" Have you ever found that the person who understands you best can also wound you most deeply, not with cruelty but with truth? Later that evening, Albert knocks softly and enters without ceremony. The fire crackles between them, the silence heavy but not hostile. He takes her hand, not as subject to queen but as equal to equal. "Victoria, he says quietly, "You must be the head always. But let me be the heart that beats beside you." The words settle in the air like dust catching candlelight. She exhales, shoulders easing. Her hand doesn't pull away. Sometimes love isn't about surrender, it's about rhythm. Two melodies learning how to play in time. The days grow into weeks, the weeks into months. They find their balance slowly. Albert takes charge of domestic affairs, the running of the household, the management of finances, even the improvement of palace sanitation. Victoria, freed from small burdens, begins to govern more effectively. Their partnership deepens not just through affection, but through shared purpose. At night, after long meetings and endless correspondence, they sit by the fire. He reads aloud from Goethe or Wordsworth. She listens, head resting on his shoulder. Outside, the city hums quietly beneath the stars, an empire breathing in rhythm with its young rulers. But love, when lived under the weight of history, requires strength. Every gesture, every letter, every silence between them becomes part of the record. They must learn not only how to love, but how to love in public. Victoria writes in her diary one evening, "To be both wife and queen is a delicate thing. Yet Albert gives me courage to be both without shame." You can almost see her as she writes, candlelight flickering on her face, the quill moving slowly across the page. Each word a quiet victory against isolation. Sometimes late at night they walk the palace gardens hand in hand. The gravel crunches beneath their feet. The air smells of wet earth and lilac. Stars scatter above them like sequins on black velvet. They talk of the future, of children, of art, of a Britain led by compassion rather than conquest. Albert believes the world can be improved through knowledge. Victoria believes it can be guided through example. Together they begin to dream aloud. Can love itself become a form of leadership? Can tenderness be as powerful as command? The night deepens, the palace windows glowing faintly behind them. Victoria pauses, looking up at the sky. "Do you think," she asks softly, "that people will remember us as we really are, or only as they wish to?" Albert smiles, slipping his arm around her shoulders. "Then we must live so truthfully that they cannot mistake the difference." The air grows still. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolls midnight, slow, resonant, steady. Their breath mingles in the cold, two clouds dissolving into one. And in that stillness, they stand not as monarch and consort, but as something more eternal. Two hearts learning how to share one crown. Snow falls outside Buckingham Palace, silent and slow, turning the iron gates and rooftops white. Inside, the air is warm and close, heavy with the scent of beeswax, lavender, and wood smoke. Candles flicker along the corridor, their flames bending slightly with each passing draft. Beyond a pair of closed doors, the Queen labors. The hour is late. Albert paces the adjoining room, his hands clasped tightly behind his back, boots marking a steady rhythm on the carpet. Every few minutes he pauses to listen. A sound from the next room, a whispered instruction, the muffled movement of attendants. He has faced parliamentary debates, political intrigue, the skepticism of courtiers. But nothing he thinks has ever felt this immense, this fragile. Can you imagine waiting while the person you love endures something you can neither control nor share? How helplessness can feel heavier than fear itself. Inside, Victoria grips the sheets, face pale, curls damp against her forehead. The midwife speaks softly, her voice calm but firm. The room smells faintly of hot linen and the metallic tang of candle smoke. Time feels suspended, measured only in breaths and heartbeats. She has faced ministers, riots, rebellions, yet this private battle feels like the truest test of sovereignty. Every contraction, every gasp, every moment of endurance connects her not to her title, but to her humanity. Outside, church bells lie silent, waiting. The city itself seems to hold its breath. "Almost there, ma'am," the midwife whispers. And then, a cry. The sound slices through the stillness like light through fog. A single, strong wail that turns the air electric. Albert bursts into the room, eyes wide, breath unsteady. The midwife steps aside, smiling. In her arms, wrapped in white linen, lies their first child, a daughter. For a moment, time ceases to exist. Victoria gazes at the tiny face, the soft tremble of her lips, the impossibly small hands. Then she looks up at Albert. The expression on his face, astonishment, joy, reverence, melts every trace of exhaustion in her body. He kneels beside the bed, takes Victoria's hand gently, presses it to his cheek. "You were magnificent," he whispers. She smiles weakly. "We have a princess." They name her Victoria Adelaide Mary Louisa. Later, when the attendants have gone and the palace has fallen quiet, Albert stands at the nursery window, the snow still falling softly outside. He watches the flakes drift past the glass, dissolving against the warmth of the room. Behind him, Victoria lies resting, her breathing deep and even, their daughter sleeping in a cradle beside her. He feels something shift within him, not pride, not relief, but awe, the kind that humbles and strengthens at once. Have you ever held something so delicate it reminded you how vast your love could be? Word spreads through London by morning. The Queen has given birth. Church bells finally ring. Crowds gather outside the palace gates. Strangers embrace, toasting the royal couple's joy as if it were their own. And somewhere in the still bright dawn, the first headline appears. "A heir to the throne is born." But within the palace walls, there is only peace. Victoria wakes, eyes fluttering open to find Albert still by her side. He hasn't slept. When she asks why, he simply says, "Because I could not look away." The nurse brings the baby to her arms. The infant yawns, eyes still closed, utterly unaware of the world waiting beyond these walls. Victoria traces the tiny fingers, the soft curve of her daughter's cheek. "She will never know a world without expectation," she murmurs. Albert leans close. "Then let her learn from us," he says, "that love and duty can live in the same heart." Outside, snow melts slowly into slush. The streets come alive again, the city's pulse returning with morning light. Inside the nursery, the Queen of England hums a lullaby barely above a whisper. Her voice trembles at first, then steadies. The tune is old, German, something her mother once sang. The rhythm of her voice merges with the soft crackle of the fireplace, the faint ticking of the clock, the steady breathing of two hearts, mother and child, finding each other in the quiet after thunder. Have you ever felt that in the stillness following a storm, something eternal had quietly begun? That night, when the palace grows silent again, Victoria writes by lamplight. "My beloved Albert watched over me with such tenderness. Our darling child sleeps beside me. I feel I have been born anew." The ink glistens faintly before drying. The fire burns low. And as she finally drifts into sleep, the snow outside ceases, leaving the world blank, peaceful, as if history itself has paused to breathe. Morning sunlight filters softly through lace curtains, washing the nursery walls in gold. The sound of laughter echoes faintly down the corridors, light, quick, unrestrained. It is the laughter of a child. And behind it, the murmur of a young queen learning how to be both ruler and mother. By now, the palace hums with a new kind of rhythm. Tiny footsteps, the clatter of toys, the squeal of delight when Princess Vicky is lifted into the air by her father. Albert's laughter, once rare, has become part of the palace's daily music. His presence steadies the household, his discipline shaping even the smallest details. You can almost see him, sleeves rolled to the elbow, stooping over a wooden horse he's carved himself, explaining to a curious child why balance matters, why the world must be understood piece by piece. Have you ever watched someone love not through words but through action? Steady, patient, unspoken? The family grows quickly. In 1841, Prince Albert Edward, the future Edward VII, is born. Then Alice, Alfred, Helena, Louise, Arthur, Leopold, Beatrice, 9 children in all. Each arrival fills the palace with both chaos and joy. The once silent halls of Buckingham now carry the sounds of nursery songs and small rebellions. Victoria writes often in her journal, "My dearest Albert is so fond of the children, and they of him. He watches over them as tenderly as any mother. Albert insists they be raised simply, with study and outdoor play, not pomp. He takes them walking in the gardens, teaches them to draw, to read maps, to observe. He tells them that understanding nature is a kind of prayer. He builds them a little cottage, a Swiss house, at Osborne, where they can pretend at chores and gather flowers." In those moments, Victoria sees the man she married not as consort or prince, but as the heart of their world. Yet for all the warmth within the palace, the outside world remains demanding. Reports, audiences, reforms, the endless machinery of empire. Victoria spends hours at her desk, pen gliding over endless pages. Her crown may glitter, but it weighs heavier with every year. Sometimes she feels torn. between the demands of motherhood and the call of monarchy, between her devotion to her husband and her duty to her people. Can love and purpose truly coexist without one consuming the other? Have you ever felt stretched between what the world asks of you and what your heart quietly craves? Evenings become their time of peace. After the children are asleep, Victoria and Albert walk the palace grounds beneath the gas lamps. He talks of progress, of railways, schools, hospitals, science. She listens, sometimes teasing, sometimes thoughtful. When she slips her arm through his, the tension of the day dissolves. Sometimes they talk of their children's futures. Albert imagines them scattered across Europe, bringing peace through family ties. Victoria smiles, though a flicker of unease crosses her mind. The world she knows rarely keeps peace for long. By the mid-1840s, they divide their lives between Buckingham Palace and Osborne House, their summer retreat on the Isle of Wight. Osborne is Albert's creation, bright, modern, built to reflect their love of the Italian seaside. He oversees every detail of its design, the architecture, the gardens, the views framed perfectly toward the Solent. Victoria adores it. Here she can shed the weight of London. No court, no ceremony, just sea air and sunlight. You can almost feel it, the warmth of the summer breeze, the salt in the air, the laughter of children echoing across the lawns. Victoria sketching beneath an oak tree, Albert nearby writing letters in the shade. The rhythmic lap of the tide below the cliffs, like the pulse of time itself. At Osborne they are not monarchs but a family. Meals are simple. Servants move quietly. Evenings end with music. Albert at the piano, Victoria turning pages for him, their youngest child asleep against her arm. Albert, she writes one night, is the perfection of every tender husband and affectionate father. To see him with our children is the picture of domestic happiness. And yet, behind those tender lines, shadows begin to form. Albert's sense of duty grows heavier with every year. His health begins to waver under constant strain. Victoria notices, though she says nothing. Her joy and her dependence have become one and the same. Can love ever be too complete, so absolute that it begins to frighten you with how much of yourself it holds? The sea whispers outside Osborne's windows. The children's laughter fades into the hum of evening insects. Victoria closes her diary, sets down her pen, and looks at Albert by the window, silhouetted against the pale blue twilight. She wonders, not for the first time, whether the peace they've built can truly last in a world that never stops moving. The empire grows larger. Their children grow older. And history, quiet but relentless, draws nearer to the chapters that will test them both. The Queen breathes deeply, feeling the salt air cool against her skin. Beside her, Albert's hand finds hers, warm and steady. For now, that is enough. 2 hands, 9 children asleep, and the illusion, just for one evening, that love can hold back time. The morning sun rises pale and thin over Buckingham Palace, its light filtered through the London fog. Inside, the rooms feel different now, grander, busier, yet strangely heavier. The laughter of children still echoes somewhere down the hall, but it no longer fills the palace as it once did. The Queen's desk is stacked with papers, letters from ministers, reports from India, dispatches from Ireland, petitions from the poor. Victoria sits before them, pen in hand, brow furrowed. The ink dries too quickly, her hand aches from signing. The empire has grown vast, too vast perhaps even for her imagination. Each paper represents a decision that touches millions, yet she feels further away from her people than ever. Can you imagine carrying a burden so immense it feels invisible to everyone else? How power from the outside looks like glory, but from within feels like solitude. Albert enters quietly, a folder tucked under his arm. He speaks softly, in that deliberate, measured tone that once comforted her and now, sometimes, wears on her nerves. Parliament will not pass the reforms unless you lend your support, he says. She sighs. And if I do, they'll say I've meddled again. The silence between them is not cold, but dense, full of everything unspoken between 2 people who love deeply but think differently. He means well. He always has. But the line between partnership and persuasion grows thin in the pressure of governance. Albert, she says quietly, you wish to improve the world, but sometimes I wish simply to rest within it. He studies her face, the weariness in her eyes, then nods. You rest, he says gently. I'll handle the rest for now. And though the gesture is tender, she feels a faint sting. A reminder that even love can become another form of dependency. Have you ever loved someone so much that their strength began to make you feel small? The 1850s arrive like a storm. Industrial progress accelerates, new machines roar through cities. Railways, telegraphs, factories, each invention reshapes Britain faster than anyone can comprehend. The world outside grows louder, faster, less forgiving. And inside the palace, that change seeps through the walls. Albert throws himself into projects: education reforms, social housing, the Great Exhibition. His mind is tireless, his passion endless. Victoria admires him but feels left behind. While he builds, she signs. While he dreams, she defends. At night, when he speaks excitedly about blueprints and steam engines, she listens, smiling faintly though her thoughts drift elsewhere. Once she had been his entire world. Now it seems that the world has become his. The Great Exhibition of 1851, Albert's masterpiece, opens in Hyde Park beneath a palace of glass and steel. Victoria arrives to the cheers of thousands, the sound swelling like an ocean wave. The Crystal Palace glitters in the sunlight, its arches soaring high above the crowd. Inside, inventions from across the empire gleam under the glass roof. Spinning machines, telescopes, locomotives, even a fountain made of pure crystal. It is the world condensed into beauty. She looks at Albert, standing tall, proud, radiant, and for a moment pride overtakes all else. He has given Britain a vision of the future, and she, the Queen, has given him the freedom to do it. Yet later that night, back at the palace, when the applause has faded, she writes quietly in her journal. He shines in all things, perhaps more than I ever shall. Can love survive the slow realization that admiration can also be a shadow? The empire continues to expand. India, Africa, Australia, Canada, its borders stretching like the seams of an overfilled garment. Reports arrive daily of conflicts, rebellions, famines. The same progress that fuels glory also breeds suffering. Victoria reads each report with a tightening in her chest. She begins to understand that empire is not just pride, it is pressure. Albert urges her to stay above politics. She tries, but the cries of the people, sometimes literally beneath her windows, find their way in. Her empathy clashes with duty, her heart fights her crown. At night, she dreams of the simpler days at Osborne, when her greatest worry was a child's cough or a letter unanswered. Now, she wakes before dawn to the sound of church bells and realizes that peace, for her, has become a memory. Have you ever looked back at a time you didn't know was happiness, until it was gone? Albert grows thinner, his cough worsens. He insists it's nothing, but the circles beneath his eyes deepen, and his hands tremble slightly when he holds a pen. Still he works, driven, relentless. Victoria begs him to rest. He refuses gently, with that same smile that once reassured her. They are still close, still affectionate, but the hours they share grow shorter, filled more with state than silence. When he finally takes her hand one evening and says, "We've done much good, you and I," she squeezes his fingers, trying not to show the fear rising quietly inside her. Because she knows, the world they've built now depends on the strength of one man's heart. And that heart is growing tired. Outside, fog rolls over the city again, swallowing the lamplight, softening every sound. The empire hums on, unstoppable. Inside the palace, the queen stares at her reflection in the window. Older now, her gaze deeper, her posture straighter. She whispers, not to anyone in particular, "How strange that the world grows stronger as we grow weary." Then, as if answering herself, she adds softly, "But still, we must carry it." It begins quietly, not with a cry or a collapse, but with the sound of Albert's cough echoing through the corridors of Windsor Castle. At first, it's nothing unusual, a winter cold, he says. But the days pass and the cough deepens, the light in his eyes dimming little by little. Victoria notices everything. The way he pauses on the stairs. The way his once firm hand trembles slightly as he signs a paper. The way fatigue clings to him even after a night's rest. The doctors reassure her, "Merely exhaustion, ma'am." But her instincts whisper otherwise. And when love becomes fear, even silence feels heavy. Have you ever watched someone fade slowly, too slowly to name it grief, yet too steadily to deny? By autumn, the palace feels colder. The fires burn as they always have, yet warmth refuses to linger. Albert continues his work, refusing to slow down. He writes letters, meets with ministers, even travels in bad weather to Cambridge to confront their son, Bertie, about a scandal. The journey leaves him pale and shaken. When he returns to Windsor, his face is gray beneath the candlelight. Victoria scolds him gently, her worry breaking through formality. "You must rest, my love," she whispers. Albert smiles faintly. "I cannot. There is still too much to do." He coughs again, deep, ragged, final. The sound slices through the quiet like something breaking. December descends. Snow falls outside Windsor's windows, muffling every sound. Inside, everything moves and whispers. Servants carrying basins, doctors entering softly, footsteps muffled by carpets. The smell of camphor and candle wax hangs in the air. Every few minutes, Victoria rises from her chair to check his breathing. She holds his hand so tightly her fingers ache. At times, he drifts into feverish half-sleep, murmuring her name, the children's names, plans left unfinished. She strokes his forehead, speaking softly. "You must get well, my angel. The children need you. I need you." But his responses grow fainter, his skin cooler. The man who once seemed carved from discipline and light is dissolving into shadow. Have you ever prayed without words, just the rhythm of breath and the desperate weight of hope? On December 14, 1861, the world she knows ends. The candles burn low. Outside, snow still falls. Inside, time stops. Albert exhales once, softly, peacefully, and then silence. So absolute it seems to erase sound itself. Victoria's cry follows, sharp and strangled. "My life as a happy one is ended. The world is gone for me." You can feel that silence, can't you? The kind that vibrates in your chest, where even your heartbeat feels intrusive. In the hours that follow, the palace becomes an echo chamber of sorrow. Every footstep feels sacrilegious. Servants avert their eyes. Courtiers speak only in whispers. Victoria locks herself away with Albert's body, refusing to leave. She sits beside him for hours, her hand on his still one, her eyes unblinking. When dawn finally comes, pale and thin, it reveals a queen transformed, not by crown or triumph, but by loss. The woman who once ruled half the world now stares into eternity through tears that refuse to stop. She orders his rooms left untouched. Fresh water brought daily, his clothes laid out, as though he might return at any moment. The palace obeys, a ritual of love and denial that will last 40 years. The funeral is somber, precise, magnificent. But Victoria can hardly see it through the haze of grief. Black crape veils her face. The world appears as shadow upon shadow. The streets are lined with mourners, hats removed, heads bowed. Church bells toll, slow, deliberate, their echoes fading into the gray December sky. In the royal chapel, candles flicker over Albert's coffin, the gold gleaming faintly through the black cloth. Beside it, Victoria stands motionless. The weight of the crown feels unbearable, meaningless, absurd. Have you ever lost someone who was not just part of your world, but the world itself to you? Afterward, she retreats to Windsor Castle, then Balmoral, then Osborne House, seeking refuge in places filled with his memory. The rooms still smell faintly of him, ink, tobacco, sandalwood. She keeps his dressing gown folded at the foot of her bed, his hairbrush still holding a few strands of golden brown hair. Every evening, she writes by lamplight, the scratch of her pen the only sound in the room. "I long to die, to be with my beloved angel. He was the light of my life, my stay, my guide." The ink blots slightly where her tears fall. The empire waits. Ministers write. Parliament calls. But the Queen no longer answers. Britain moves forward, yet its monarch stands still, frozen in that December night, her heart entombed beside the man who gave it meaning. Outside, the industrial age surges on. Trains, telegraphs, colonies, inventions. A world of noise and progress. Inside the palace, the silence deepens. Victoria wears black from that day forward. Not for a month, not for a year, but for life. The widow of Windsor. The queen of shadows. The woman who loved once, and never stopped. The winter of 1862 drapes itself over Britain like mourning cloth. Snow falls softly over the roofs of Windsor, blanketing the palace gardens where Albert once walked with the children. The world outside keeps turning. Trains still whistle through the countryside. Factories still hum, Parliament still debates. But within these castle walls, time has stopped. Victoria, now dressed entirely in black, moves through the halls like a shadow. Her footsteps echo faintly on marble floors, the sound swallowed by the vastness of empty rooms. Every day she visits Albert's apartments. The servants still place hot water on his washstand, arrange his clothes as if he might appear, and dust the books he'll never again open. The scent of lavender and old wood lingers, mingling with the faint metallic tang of candle smoke. She touches the arm of his chair, runs her fingers along his desk. Everything remains exactly as he left it. Have you ever held on to something? Not because you believe it will return, but because letting go feels like betrayal? Letters arrive daily from ministers, nobles, and world leaders. Condolences, requests, invitations, but she rarely reads them. Her hand trembles when she lifts her pen. The ink stains her fingers as she writes, "I am alone, utterly alone, and my life as a happy one is ended." She no longer attends parliament or public ceremonies. The people, at first sympathetic, soon grow restless. They whisper, "Where is the Queen? Has she abandoned us?" The newspapers begin to call her the Widow of Windsor, their tone shifting from pity to impatience. And yet she cannot, will not, face the crowds. The very idea of public life feels unbearable, as if the sunlight itself would expose her sorrow. Can you imagine mourning so deeply that even daylight feels intrusive? In the evenings, she sits by the window with only a single lamp burning. The light trembles in the glass, casting long shadows that stretch like ghosts across the room. She listens to the sounds of the palace, the faint ticking of the clock, the rustle of servants' footsteps, the soft crackle of fire. Sometimes she thinks she hears his voice, low, familiar, close enough to answer. But when she turns, there is only silence. Her grief becomes her companion. She speaks to it, feeds it, tends it as if it were another living thing. In a way, it is the last piece of him that remains. At Osborne House, she feels closest to him. The sea air carries echoes of their shared laughter. The children's voices, the sound of his footsteps along the gravel path. She spends hours walking those paths alone. The small dog Dash no longer at her side. The sky above a muted wash of gray. Each evening, she writes in her journal by candlelight. "I try to pray, but my thoughts wander to him always. I cannot imagine ever being happy again." The candle flickers as if in answer, the flame bending toward her, then straightening, like a silent nod from the universe. Do you think grief ever truly leaves us? Or does it simply change its shape until we learn to live around it? Years begin to pass, though she feels them only faintly. Birthdays, holidays, even coronations of foreign rulers, all blur into a single gray current of time. Her children grow, marry, move away, each carrying a piece of her sorrow into other lands. They write letters from Prussia, from Denmark, from Russia. She answers them all. But every letter, no matter the subject, circles back to Albert. Even her love for her children cannot fill the silence he left behind. One figure, however, refuses to leave her in solitude. A tall Scotsman, John Brown, once Albert's outdoor servant at Balmoral. He is blunt, loyal, and utterly unafraid of her melancholy. "Your Majesty," he says, "you've wept enough for one lifetime. Come walk with me." At first, she bristles. How dare a servant speak so plainly? But his honesty, his rough kindness, becomes a strange kind of comfort. He doesn't treat her like a queen or a widow, but like a person who still breathes, still aches, still belongs to the living. Soon, his name begins to appear everywhere. In her diaries, in her letters, always with gratitude, sometimes with affection. Gossip spreads through the court. They call her Mrs. Brown. She ignores them all. After all, what does reputation matter to a woman who has already lost everything? At Balmoral, under the wide Scottish sky, she begins to walk again. The air smells of pine and rain. The ground is soft with moss. The mountains rise blue and quiet in the distance. Each breath feels cleaner, freer. She speaks to Brown as they walk. Of Albert, of duty, of loneliness. He listens without ceremony. And in that listening, something fragile begins to stir again within her. Not joy exactly, but acceptance. Evening comes early in the Highlands. Mist gathers around the castle, and the light fades to silver. Inside, Victoria sits by the fire, watching the flames dance in quiet rhythm. She whispers, "Perhaps he does not wish me to follow him yet. Perhaps he means for me to live, for both of us." The fire crackles softly, a single spark rising into the air like a tiny star, and for the first time in years, she allows herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, She can learn to exist within the shadow of love, without being consumed by it. The year is 1866, and the air in London carries a different sound. The city hums louder now, railways, bells, the chime of new machinery. Britain is changing, restless and alive, yet something still feels missing. For nearly 5 years, the throne has been occupied but unseen. The people whisper in taverns and along cobblestone streets. Has our queen vanished forever? Inside Balmoral, Victoria sits by the window, a teacup cooling untouched beside her. She watches rain trace thin silver lines down the glass. Her reflection, pale, veiled, motionless, looks almost like a ghost. Letters from her ministers lie unopened on the table. Each bears the same plea written in different words. Your Majesty, it is time to be seen again. She sighs, the sound heavy but quiet. Duty, that old, persistent companion, is knocking once more. And though her heart still aches, she knows she cannot ignore it forever. Have you ever tried to return to the world after losing the person who anchored you to it? How do you begin to breathe again when every breath feels borrowed? It is John Brown who gives her courage. He enters the room one morning without waiting to be summoned. A boldness no courtier would ever dare. You'll not hide from them all your life, he says. His Scottish accent rolls through the stillness like thunder softened by kindness. They need their queen. And you. He pauses, meeting her eyes. You need them. She says nothing at first. Then, after a long silence, she nods. Perhaps, she whispers, I need to remember who I was, before I was only his widow. When Victoria finally returns to London, the city greets her like a long-lost heartbeat. Crowds line the streets. Church bells ring. Flags wave from windows still darkened by soot. It is not the triumphal roar of coronation, but something gentler, the sound of collective relief. She rides through Hyde Park in her open carriage, the black lace of her mourning veil fluttering in the breeze. Children on their father's shoulders call her name. Some weep. Some simply smile, their faces lifted to see her at last. For a moment, the noise overwhelms her. But as she lifts her gloved hand in a tentative wave, a warmth rises in her chest. Not joy, not pride, but something softer, belonging. Can you feel that? That fragile spark when grief loosens its grip just enough to let a little light in? Behind the scenes, one man becomes her bridge back to the world. Benjamin Disraeli, the Prime Minister. He is unlike the others, poetic, charming, unafraid of her melancholy. Where most ministers speak of policy, he speaks of beauty, loyalty, and the poetry of empire. He flatters her gently, calling her the most remarkable woman alive. And somehow she believes him, not for the words themselves, but for the way he says them. Their friendship grows like ivy, slow but sure. Disraeli knows how to make her smile. How to remind her that the world still holds conversation, color, and grace. He tells her stories of India, of the empire she rules but has never seen. When he speaks, her imagination stirs again. Visions of palm trees, spice markets, sunsets over faraway seas. By 1876, that bond between queen and minister blossoms into something historic. Disraeli presents her with a new title, Empress of India. The announcement echoes through Parliament and across the empire. For the first time since Albert's death, her eyes brighten with something like pride. I am Empress of India, she writes in her diary that night, and for once her pen moves without the tremor of sorrow. She begins to study Indian history, its languages and cultures. Soon, new scents drift from her private apartments. Cardamom, cinnamon, cloves, brought by her new attendant, Abdul Karim, a young clerk from Agra who teaches her Urdu. He calls her mother, and though the courtiers whisper, Victoria finds in him a reflection of the gentle loyalty she once felt from Albert. History will misjudge these friendships, but in truth they are acts of survival. The human heart cannot live in mourning forever. It must find new forms of connection, or it slowly turns to stone. Have you ever discovered comfort in an unexpected place? Something the world might not understand, but your soul quietly recognizes as healing? Public life resumes. She opens Parliament once again. The great halls of Westminster filled with candlelight and ceremony. Her black gown glitters faintly beneath the gas lamps, the jewels at her throat catching every spark of light. As she speaks, her voice trembles, at first from nerves, then from emotion. But by the end of her address, the tremor steadies. The silence afterward is profound, the respect in the room almost tangible. Outside the cheers return, softer than before but deeper, fuller, as though the nation itself breathes easier knowing she is back. That night, alone in her study, she closes her journal after writing one simple line. I have lived through death. Perhaps now I shall learn to live again. Beyond her window, London glows with gaslight, the great engines of empire humming through the night. Inside, the Queen finally sets down her grief like a shawl she has carried too long. It still lies close, within reach, but it no longer smothers her. The widow of Windsor has begun to return, not as the woman she was, but as something rarer, a survivor of her own sorrow. It is the 1880s, and the sun rarely sets on Victoria's dominion. From the frozen edges of Canada to the gold-lit deserts of Africa, from India's monsoon plains to the coast of Australia, her name, Victoria Regina, Empress of India, is spoken beneath countless skies. Ships fly her flag across every ocean, railways carve her initials into continents, and the sound of English echoes in markets thousands of miles from London. The Queen's empire has become a world unto itself, magnificent, unstoppable, and heavy with contradiction. Its progress feels divine, yet its shadow stretches long. Have you ever built something so vast you could no longer see its edges? Something that inspired both pride and guilt? From Windsor Castle, Victoria studies maps that cover entire walls, oceans inked blue, territories tinted red. She traces them with her finger, pausing over places she will never see. Bombay, Cape Town, Melbourne, Singapore. Each name is a whisper, a promise, a wait. Albert's vision of progress has become real. Machines roar, telegraphs sing, cities rise where jungles once stood. And yet, beneath the gleaming surface, she senses disquiet. Letters reach her describing famines, uprisings, and the strain of distant rule. The empire, though powerful, is restless. Her ministers assure her, all is well. But she knows better. Empires, like people, rarely show their pain in public. One evening, she walks alone through the long corridor at Windsor. Portraits of her ancestors, Henry's, George, and Elizabeth's, stare down from gilded frames. She stops before Albert's portrait. He looks as he always has, calm, young, eternal. She studies his eyes and whispers, "Your dream has come true, my angel, but at what cost?" Outside, thunder rolls softly in the distance. It feels like the empire itself, powerful, far away, and impossible to ignore. Have you ever realized that even success can carry the echo of loss? Her later reign is filled with ceremony, jubilees, banquets, processions. The empire celebrating its living symbol. In 1887, for her golden jubilee, delegations arrived from every corner of the world. Indian princes in jeweled turbans, African envoys in embroidered robes, governors and generals in starched white uniforms. London transforms into a living mosaic of the empire's colors. As Victoria appears on the balcony, the crowd below erupts, cheers, flags, confetti swirling like snow. She stands unmoving, overwhelmed. The faces blur together, thousands, tens of thousands, a sea of devotion and empire. And for a fleeting moment, she feels Albert beside her, his hand on hers, his voice whispering, "See what we began." That night, when the palace grows quiet, she writes in her diary, "I have never felt so proud, nor so small. For all the splendor, all the crowns and banners, she feels herself but a vessel, a woman carried along by history, both worshipped and imprisoned by it. Isn't that what greatness often is? A golden cage built from admiration and duty?" Outside Britain, the empire expands deeper into Africa and Asia. The newspapers call it the Age of Progress. But behind the headlines, darker truths unfold. Wars of conquest, uprisings, exploitation, the quiet suffering of those who live under the flag she loves. Victoria rarely sees this side directly, but fragments reach her desk. Reports of rebellion, letters from missionaries, quiet protests from politicians who question the empire's soul. She struggles to reconcile them. The queen who believes in civilization, and the woman who once mourned the pain of her own people. In her prayers, she begins to ask not for victory, but for mercy. In Balmoral, far from London's noise, she finds a rare kind of peace. The Scottish air smells of pine and earth. Mist rolls across the hills, softening everything it touches. Here she rides again, slowly wrapped in furs, accompanied only by a few guards and her faithful John Brown, now older, quieter, but still devoted. When he dies unexpectedly, she weeps as she hasn't in years. Two men had truly known her heart. One a prince, one a servant. Both gone now, leaving behind the echo of loyalty that outlasts titles. She commissions a statue of Brown, despite protests from her court. Let them talk, she says firmly. He was my friend. I will not pretend otherwise. Have you ever refused to rewrite your past just to make others comfortable? As the century nears its end, Victoria begins to watch the world change faster than her eyes can follow. Telephones, motor cars, electric lights. The inventions Albert once dreamed of now fill the streets of London. She rides in her first automobile, clutching the seat as the machine jolts forward. Remarkable, she says, and then almost wistfully, but what will become of horses? It is more than a question about animals. It is a question about eras, about how quickly the world forgets the hands that built it. Her Diamond Jubilee in 1897 is unlike anything the world has seen. 60 years on the throne, an empire at its peak, its queen now a symbol of endurance more than power. Her carriage moves through London streets under a canopy of flags and cheers. Old men remove their hats, young girls wave flowers, and from balconies the poor and rich alike shout her name. The air smells of coal smoke, rain and roses. The bells ring, and as she looks out over her people, she feels something profound. Not triumph, but gratitude. For the first time in decades, she smiles. I have done my best, she murmurs softly, and in that moment, perhaps she finally believes it. That night, after the celebrations fade and the carriages roll away, Victoria sits by her window once more. The city glows beneath her, lamps reflected in the Thames like stars scattered across water. She leans back in her chair, her breathing slow, her eyes distant. The empire stretches endlessly beyond her sight, beautiful, imperfect, alive. She whispers into the stillness, Albert, the light has lasted longer than I dreamed. It is January 1901, and the wind that rolls across the Isle of Wight carries the chill of an old century ending. At Osborne House, the sea glimmers beyond the gardens, silver and calm. Inside, the Queen's rooms are dimly lit, only the soft glow of a lamp beside her bed, the steady rhythm of a clock ticking toward midnight. Victoria is 91 years old. Her body has grown frail, her movements slow, yet her mind remains sharp. She still dictates letters, still asks after her children and grandchildren, though she sometimes forgets which of them rule which corner of Europe now. Germany, Russia, Norway, Greece. Her blood flows through every royal house like a quiet thread binding the continent together. Once that thought gave her comfort. Now it feels fragile, like a spider's web trembling in the wind. She cannot know that within 15 years, those same bloodlines will face each other across battlefields lit by fire and gas. Do you ever wonder how close peace and ruin live to one another? Sometimes only a heartbeat apart? Her family gathers at Osborne, filling the house with a strange mixture of life and waiting. Children's laughter drifts faintly down the hallways, quickly hushed by nurses and courtiers. Doctors move softly between rooms, their expressions professional but grave. Servants tiptoe. Ministers arrive, remove their hats, and stand silently in the drawing room. Victoria spends most of her days in the same armchair by the window. The view beyond, the sullen waters, the gray sky, the slow movement of ships, feels like a mirror of her own breathing, steady, then slower, then still slower. She reads her Bible, her hand trembling slightly as she turns each page. Sometimes she dozes, and in those moments her attendants say she murmurs names. Albert, John Brown, Disraeli. Ghosts that time has not erased. On the night of January 21st, she asks to be propped up with pillows. Her breathing is shallow, but her voice is clear. Open the window, she whispers. I would like to feel the sea air. The curtains sway. A faint breeze moves through the room, carrying the salt scent of the water and the rustle of winter leaves. For a long while she says nothing. Then, almost to herself, I thought I would see him again, so soon. The nurse at her side squeezes her hand. Outside, the sky deepens from gray to violet. Have you ever felt the world begin to slow, as if even time itself is holding its breath for you? Morning comes softly. January 22nd, 1901. A thin light seeps through the clouds, pale and forgiving. The Queen's family surrounds her, Her eldest son, Bertie, the future Edward VII, stands closest. He kneels beside her bed, his hand trembling as he kisses her cheek. Her daughters whisper prayers. Someone begins to hum one of Albert's favorite hymns. Victoria's eyes flutter open one last time. For a brief instant they seem to clear, blue and bright as they once were. She looks upward and a faint smile touches her lips. Then gently she exhales. The room falls still. After 63 years on the throne, the Victorian era ends in perfect silence. Outside, the Union Jack is lowered to half-mast. A hush spreads across the empire. From the docks of Liverpool to the hills of Calcutta, from Cape Town to Melbourne, millions stop what they are doing. Factories pause, churches toll their bells, and even the restless engines of empire seem to hesitate for a moment, as if paying respect to the woman who had outlasted an age. Her body lies in state at Osborne, dressed not in royal robes but in white. Beside her lies a small lock of Albert's hair, and one of John Brown's handkerchiefs. Her final, quiet rebellion against the etiquette of kings. Can you picture it? The pale winter light falling through the window. The sea beyond, the world holding still between centuries. The funeral that follows is vast, solemn, and strangely tender. Royal banners flutter from carriages. Soldiers in scarlet uniforms march to the slow beat of drums. Across the channel, her grandchildren, the future monarchs of Europe, walk behind her coffin. Kaiser Wilhelm of Germany, Tsar Nicholas of Russia, and King Edward of Britain. 3 cousins, 3 empires, unaware of the war that will one day tear them apart. The procession moves through London beneath a sky of drifting gray. People line the streets, silent, weeping, some kneeling. A century passes with her, right there in the rhythm of the drums. At last, the coffin reaches Frogmore, the royal mausoleum she built decades ago. The air smells faintly of stone and lilies. Inside, the walls are painted with golden stars, their reflections shimmering in the dim candlelight. Waiting beside the marble tomb lies Albert, as he has for 40 years. The priest's voices echo softly, dust to dust. The queen is lowered beside her beloved. The lids of 2 coffins meet at last. For a long moment, no one moves. Then the candles are extinguished one by one, until only one small flame remains. The last light of Victoria's age. Flickers, wavers, and then steadies again. Because history does not truly end. It only changes its form, continuing quietly in the hearts of those who remember. Night settles over Frogmore. The stars appear above the dome. The same constellations that watched over her coronation. Her triumphs, her grief, her long reign. In the quiet, the world exhales. The Victorian era has fallen asleep, but its dreams still live among us. Perhaps that is how all stories end. Not with a closing door, but with a gentle turning of the page. Now close your eyes. Breathe slowly. Let the echo of this life, of duty, love, and endurance, settle into stillness. For tonight, the empire sleeps. The queen rests beside her beloved, and the past drifts peacefully into memory.